Thanks, Kelly. So I'm Steve. I'm going to walk you through this tech talk here. We're going to talk a little bit about just kind of how to manage and set up your orgs and go through some deployment best practices, and then have some time for some questions and comments. This will be a little bit of a different tech talk than kind of what's happened before if you've been in some of the other tech talks, as this is less demo heavy and probably a little bit more opinionated than we've done before. But we wanted to talk about some things that we believe work for you all. So along those lines, these are recommendations. They're not requirements. So what's I think more important than exactly how we talk about them in this demo is probably understanding why we're bringing this up and why we're talking about things this way. If you're a Cloud.gov user, that the platform itself is quite opinionated, and with that opinion, if you can fall within the confines of that opinion, you get great power and a whole bunch of efficiency gain. This is along those same lines, but these are less related to the technology and more honestly related to kind of the human side of the fact that we all work in teams. We're all human beings. We are, as organizations, trying to develop shared context, and not only to be kind to other people, but to be kind to ourselves, right? Because I know I've had the case where I've actually worked on something and I've gone away from it for a while and had to come back to it and wish that maybe I left myself a little bit more of a nice place to come back to. So as we go through this, keep those things in mind. And kind of understand why we're talking about the things that we are. Okay, so the first thing, managing orgs and spaces. There is a Terraform provider. If you are not familiar with Terraform, Terraform is infrastructure as code. It's declarative. It is centralized. The Terraform artifacts can be versioned in places like GitHub. This is actually a great way to organize your spaces and your users and your roles, your service instances, your user provided service instances, and all of those different elements, because you can put this into version control. It's recreatable. It can be far more secure doing it this way, and we'll show you that here in a second. And I think along the lines of those human element aspects, you can capture your intentions. So you can put comments into Terraform files. You can put your intentions in commit messages in GitHub. If you just go in and create a whole bunch of user provided service instances, well, what are they? Why are they there? Why did you create them a certain way? You can start capturing all of those things. And so I think that's important as you start thinking about your team, or potentially bringing on new team members. Like, how can you make this better for everybody, as well as your future self that probably will forget what you did and why you did. So let's look at a quick demo here, actually, of Terraform and using Terraform to start provisioning some things on Cloud Foundry. So I've got a split screen here with a terminal window at the bottom and some Terraform at the top. We're going to do two different things here. I'm just going to show you really quickly how to get set up with Terraform, but then we're going to use this to create the spaces, assign users to roles within our spaces, and make sure that only the users that we have specified are assigned to roles within our spaces. And then I'll show you a real quick demo of just doing service instance creation too. So if you're not familiar with Terraform, Terraform has a notion of providers. There's a provider for Cloud Foundry. You can think about that as the integration for Cloud Foundry. You need to provide a little bit of configuration, essentially just the API endpoint. So in our case, api.fr.cloud.gov, username and password. These things have all been parameterized in this Terraform. So this file is safe to check into version control. There is a credentials file that has a git. We have a git ignore on that. Do not check that into version control. That would be bad. Anyway, to use Terraform, there's a bit of a challenge of a chicken and egg kind of problem here, because we need an account to actually give to Terraform here for the username and password. On Cloud.gov, you can do that with a service account. But to create a service account, you actually need a space to create that service instance representing that service account. If you go to this repository after the talk, we actually scripted this whole thing. What this will actually do is just go create a single space for you. I've decided to name my space Primordial Soup because that's where everything is coming from. I set a quota on that space of a single service instance because all I want to do is create the service account service instance here, and it will create a service key, get the right credentials, and generate a file for you. So obviously, before you run any scripts, look at what it does before you run it on your machine. But it should do what we need to do, essentially creating a service account that Terraform can use. So we can actually go through now and run some Terraform commands. And I'm going to try to pick up the pace here. Rather than destroy, we're going to apply. And so I'm going to pass in my credentials file, and I'm also going to pass in a file of users. I will show you what that looks like here in a second. The advantage, again, of using Terraform in this way is that everybody understands, everybody has the same shared. I must have actually typed something or changed something. I'm sorry. What did I do here? I didn't change this file, did I? Oh, sorry. I think that's actually is that a network error? Maybe. Yes. Okay, that was a network issue. Well, that was great. That was a little scary during a demo. The nice part about Terraform Apply is it tells you what it's going to do. So let's go look at the Terraform real quick for this space. All I'm having it do is actually create a space quota for my space. I'm having it create a space. In my case, my space is going to be called dev, and I'm telling it which org it's in. I'm doing some other config like allowing SSH, and then I'm assigning users to roles. And this, I think, is actually really important, something I really want to see people do. I can declare what users are assigned to what roles in Terraform. And because I have this force flag equal to true, what that means is that if any users get assigned to my spaces or my roles that are not in Terraform, Terraform's going to remove them. And so you can actually put this into your CI system and run it every hour to ensure that only the users that you've declared have access to your users or your roles and spaces are in your spaces. So you can be far more secure and worry a lot less about all of these one-off changes that somebody could do outside of Terraform. Okay. Anyway, that's all that's really going to happen here. That's what this summary is. I'm looking at the clock and going to pick up the pace, but I'm going to say yes. And Terraform's actually going to make it so. I can rerun Terraform Apply. It will compare what's already happened, and it will, do a diff for me and make those changes. So this is infrastructure as code, and your orgs, your spaces, your users assigned to roles, these are actually all infrastructure level elements. So why not put them in code, right? Why not put them in Terraform? I don't want to run out of time, so I'll just briefly show you that you can also create all of your service instances. You can create service keys. This will all be in that repository there. And so again, you can put comments in there like, why does this exist? What is this, right? We all know that Cloud.gov gives you the ability to repeatedly push applications using manifest, but the question that always comes up is, well, where did the service instances come from? Well, they can come from Terraform. Again, declare your dependencies, use a declarative methodology, use a declarative technology like Terraform, and you'll just be more secure and also have that better shared awareness within your team. All right, so go check out the Primordial Soup in the repository. The next thing I want to talk about briefly is artifacts, semantic versions, and releases. So what's an artifact? An artifact is essentially a built or packaged application. So maybe this is a jar file if you use Java. It could be a binary file if you're compiling Go into binary. It could just be a zip file of Ruby or Python or whatever. It doesn't matter. But the idea here is we want to be sure that the things that we've actually tested in dev, so the things that we've deployed to our dev space, is the thing that's getting deployed to production, right? If we're just deploying from a branch in GitHub, did that branch change after the tests have run? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not, right? And so building artifacts actually forces you as a software developer to think more about what's changing in your applications. And that's really important. So if you're building artifacts, how do you distinguish one artifact from another, right? How do you distinguish my application zip file from one I just built 2 seconds ago? Well, that's really where semantic versioning comes in. So if you're not familiar with semantic versioning, I'm sure you've seen semantic versions, basically just 3-digit versions where the first digit equates to a major version, the second is a minor version, the third digit is a patch version. Well, when you adopt a strategy of semantic versioning, and ironically Terraform doesn't, the actual Terraform project, the major versions equate to breaking changes in your application. The minor bumps equate to additive changes to your application, so new features or new elements within your API. And the patch bumps equate to backwards compatible fixes. So if you go to places like semver.org and read about semantic versioning, you're going to read all about API interoperability. And that's great. Semantic versions are great for that because you can understand when potentially breaking changes are being introduced. But I actually think the bigger impact is on developers. If you're doing semantic versioning, the only elements that can decide what is a major change and a minor change is a human being. It forces you to think about your code and the changes that you're going to be making, right? Are you making a breaking change to your application? That means you're going to have to do a major version bump. That's significantly different than just doing some kind of backwards compatible fix. So I highly encourage you to start considering building artifacts and throwing a semantic version on every single one of them. If you're doing that, you might as well then just cut a release. So what's a release? A release is a version to artifact with change notes. Again, think about the human element, right? And this is a little just screenshot from one of the Cloud Foundry deployments. What changed? Write it down so that you know, so that your teammates know, maybe so that your compliance and security folks know, right? What was running at a given point in time? Well, if you're building an artifact, you're throwing a version on it and you're cutting a release, you know what was running at any given point in time. That might be necessary to go back and do some historical things, or maybe it's just necessary because your latest release turns out to not be a good one. Maybe there's a bug and you need to roll back to your last known good state. That's as simple as just changing a version number in a parameterized manifest and repushing, right? There's significant value in starting to think about how you're compiling and managing your applications and how you're treating those applications throughout the life cycle. So again, a lot of these things are opinions, but the platform itself is opinionated. If you start adopting this, you can start adopting these approaches even outside of Cloud.gov. And it really forces you to think about the fact that you want to be kind to yourself, you want to be kind to your teammates, but you also want to do things securely in a repeatable fashion as well. So that's what we had. I know I went a little over the 15 minutes, but we wanted to allow some time for questions and comments and see what people thought. And here are some links, by the way. So we will share this.
Hey, Steve, this is Mark. I want to start us off with a quick question, if I could, maybe prime the pump here. Going back to Terraform, I was wondering, as you were talking about this, if it seems like a definitely more secure way to do things. I'm also wondering if writing things in Terraform and having version control infrastructure as code could help in an ATO because you'd have artifacts for an auditor or authorizing official to look at. And I don't know if anybody with more authoritative knowledge than myself in this tech talk wants to chime in, but it seems like that would be a thing if I was an authorizing official or an auditor. I'd sure appreciate Terraform files so you could show me this is how we're setting up this space.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And if anybody else wants to chime in on that, please do. you know, it's not just the initial ATO too. It's, you know, we quarterly have to go do account reviews. Well, if I'm declaring all of my users and all of my roles the way that I showed you there, well, do I need to do an account review anymore if that's running every hour? I don't know. Maybe, you know, maybe we can talk to our auditors and just prove that that functionality exists, so that's running every hour, right? In which case our you know, our declaration of who our users is just ends up being that user's file, which I can't find because of the Zoom stuff. So. Looks like we've got potentially some questions in the chat, maybe.
So if you folks have any questions now, please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask directly to Steve, or we have other engineers from Cloud.gov on the line, and we should be able to answer any of your questions. If you don't feel comfortable unmuting or unface muting, please feel free to type your question into the chat and one of us will read it aloud.
Okay, well, let me go back here real quick because I did kind of skip through this. There's a few things I do want to just highlight if you do decide to use Terraform with our service accounts. So when you generate a service account, you'll see a username that looks an awful lot like a GUID because it is, but it's actually not the GUID of the user. So be careful because Terraform wants the GUID of the user, which is not that username. Because you obviously would need your Terraform user to be a space developer if that's going to be the one actually creating service instances and managing them. So just wanted to point that out. Sorry that I skipped over that earlier. Looks like we do have a question. Can a project that uses Django still benefit from the Semver approach, even if it doesn't involve any built artifacts? Well, so in reality, you can build your application into an artifact. And that's really what I'm talking about here, right? Is you've got your application in source code. And obviously there's a version attached to every commit that you have in source code. But if you pulled that commit and packaged it up, whether it's a zip file, jar file, whatever else, that becomes an artifact, right? Anytime you actually have that bundled thing, that becomes an artifact. If you choose not to build artifacts, that's perfectly fine. You don't need to, you don't have to. You could certainly push specific Git commits. The one thing I would say is don't just push whatever the latest is in a branch. Make sure it's exactly what you tested, right? Again, I think I personally, as a developer, like to always put versions on things because it clearly communicates what the expectation is with changes to the application. So thanks for that question. So we got another one. When a change is made to the checked-in Terraform configuration, does a person outside process have to manually run something to apply that change, or does Cloud.gov pick that up somehow? Yeah, so great question. Actually, what we really want to do is not what I demoed, but do all of the Terraform in your CI/CD system. There's nothing, Cloud.gov doesn't know about Terraform. Terraform is actually totally external to the platform itself. And it is Terraform is making API calls to the platform to do the things that we need it to do. So what you really want to do is take everything I showed you in Terraform and hook that up to your CI/CD system. What I would do if I was implementing this in something like Concourse, which is what I typically use, is anytime any of the Terraform files changed, or anytime any of the variable files have changed, I would trigger an automatic deployment or execution of that job in my CI/CD system. There's nothing inherent within Cloud.gov that knows that any of this is happening. It only knows when the API calls are being made. So yeah, great question. You definitely need to do you know, integrate this with your build process, essentially. Any other questions? All right. Well, we've got a link up here. I've got a few small little things that I'll be pushing up as changes here. Oops, sorry, somebody else did that. How did that happen? We do have a repository. We'll share these slides. You know, take some time to go through that. If you have questions or have problems or challenges when you're going through this and trying to do it on Cloud.gov, reach out to us on support, and we'll be happy to walk you through it. But I hope we gave you some things to think about in how you're kind of organizing things and treating your org spaces and applications.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was an excellent presentation. And folks, I did drop this in the chat, but just letting you know that we have been recording this, as I'm sure you're all aware, and I will be sending out the link to this when it gets posted on YouTube, probably Monday of next week. We can also include some of these links in that email as well if folks would like that. So thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you next month for our June Tech Talk.
Thank you very much.
Folks.